Welcome back to Be the Frequency. I stumbled upon something on, I want to say it was maybe TikTok, that I was like, oh, this would be so good to talk about. And I feel like so many of you are kind of in this stage right now in your life, especially if you listen to this podcast. This is probably not your first introduction to spirituality, to energy work, things like that. Usually people find me after they've like dabbled in Reiki, after they've done a, they're like, okay, I'm kind of into yoga. I've kind of been doing it. And by the time that they see me, they're often then working through more kind of the complexities of their life. And so something that I was like, oh gosh, this everybody needs to hear this probably that's working with me or in my sphere, because they're probably at this stage, is really the stage that you're at when you've gone through an awakening, okay, like a spiritual awakening where you become a lot more aware of who you are, why you do what you do, and are curious about how you learned those things. And you've probably started to unravel some of the complexities that is your childhood, is your subconscious programming, is, all of this conditioning that's happened, all this learning that is solidified or has created these kind of more of the highway patterns of the mind. And you're like, hey, I need to build new pathways. I'm starting from a dirt road and I really need something more. And so by the time you're seeing me, you're like, okay, I'm very much ready for more than just a guided meditation. I am beyond like maybe that, maybe I dabble in some of these things, but I've already started to become aware. I already know kind of a little bit about maybe the chakra system, or I know a little bit about energy, or it's something that I'm interested in. I've done maybe a full moon ceremonies, things like that. Like those are kind of things that are fun for me. Those are things that I enjoy. So then what happens beyond that time? What happens? What I call is your second awakening, or your awakening to your awakening, right? So if you're this person, you're like, okay, again, dabbled. I have crystals. I've got some bracelets. Maybe you've come with me on a retreat to maybe Sedona or Costa Rica or something like that. And you're like, I have seen a lot of these patterns and I'm starting to work through things. But then what happens is I see a lot of people get so stuck in this identifying themselves with their spirituality, and instead of being spirituality and connection to self as a way to live. And that's really where I think that turning point is in your living, is when you no longer need all these kind of rituals to connect to yourself. You've already come home to yourself enough that you realize the healing part and um, the journey that you're on is something that you will be on forever, because it's just getting to know yourself, and it's getting to know your truth, and it's getting to know how that truth expresses. So what do you do when you when you are having the awakening from the awakening, right? You no longer kind of see the smoke and mirrors, like you need a new crystal to manifest something. You need a new, that you need to see your healer every other week in order to stay on point, in order to manage your energy. Like you're starting to do a lot of those things because you've implemented what teachers and mentors have told you, and you've found the truth in those things for yourself. It may not, everything might not ring true for you. I've had many clients that, they take a lot of what I share or a lot of methods that I teach, and they're like, hey, but this one thing didn't work for me, or I didn't really like, if you're, I mean, some people are like, listen, like sitting and meditating is really hard for me. But what they do is they run and or they walk, and they find that moment where like everything else, like their body, it's almost again like the metronome of the breath that you would pay attention to when you're sitting and meditating or lying down and meditating. They find it while they're running. Like it's like their mind starts to clear. They feel very like conscientious of their breathing. They're like with their breath, and they're just with that rhythm, right? Out, in, out, in, out. And they find that moment. Some people use mala beads. Some people find those moments when they're like, the first time I touched that sense of meditation was in yoga. And now I'm able to find it in everyday life, right? I'm able to find that connection, that presence, things like that. If this is you and all these things are like, yeah, like you kind of stopped, like I feel like now it's interesting because I'll buy jewelry pieces that have crystals in them, but I no longer seek out specific crystals all the time for specific reasons. Now, do I have things that I love? And do I have things that I recognize? Like when I wear, there are certain ones that when I wear them, I feel them in my body. When I wear Moldavite, I can literally feel the wherever, whether I have a ring and I also have a necklace. And when I wear either one of those, the space that's around that, my hand or like my chest, will actually start to feel almost like this buzzing of amplification, which is very, very strange. Moldavite is known for enhancing your psychic intuition. I do feel very, very almost super sensitive, sometimes like a little bit uncomfortably so. So I'm very conscientious of when I'm wearing it. I don't wear it in big crowds. I don't wear it, stuff like that because I recognize how it affects my body. But instead of being like the only time I can access my intuition is when I wear this, I recognize the signs and the patterns. And if you're kind of in that where you're starting to see some of those things, we're going to talk about what you're doing now when it comes to healing beyond your healing. You know what I mean? When it comes to the living part. And that's really what it is. Your awakening to your awakening is actually just fucking living. It's just living. And we get so caught in the moments that, again, that euphoric moment, maybe in a Shavasana meditation, or maybe an ayahuasca retreat, or when you just go on a retreat in general and you're like, it's so easy to kind of focus on all those rituals and you come back home and everything falls to shit. If that's you, understand that at some point, the more that you implement these things that make you feel really present and coming home to yourself and your truth, you will stop seeking out those like almost like spiritual dopamine, like that hit that makes you feel connected to everything around you, makes you feel connected to the divine, makes you feel connected to your intuition, makes you feel so much more connected to who you are. And you'll start realizing that that was always there. You always had this within you. You just had these things. It's almost like wearing too many layers of clothing, right? You're like, gosh, like this, it feels heavy, it feels tight, it feels restrictive. Okay, I'm going to take that off. Okay, this isn't for the right weather. Okay, I'm going to take that off. Like you kind of start to unravel all of these things that you've put on, or hats, masks, however you want to like associate it or make a metaphor about it. But I feel like what's happened is throughout people's lives, you develop this conditioning in order to survive. And when you start to embark on your healing journey. And I use that term carefully because I think when you constantly feel like you're on a healing journey, you're always seeking to look for something that's wrong. However, when you start to look at your patterns, when you start to look at these things that make you not feel like your truest self, and you start to unravel those things and you start to work on your relationship to trauma, you start to work on nervous system regulation, you start to work on the way that you interact in your friendships, in your relationships, in your career, in your business, all of the things, then you kind of start to realize you're like, oh, if I'm constantly chasing this high, it's always outside of me. It's always outside of me. And we talk about this a lot inside of my business containers where they think, success is on the other side of like a next strategy, or success is on the other side of like, I just need 5 more clients, then I'll be happy. And it's like the reality is if your nervous system does not feel safe to have those things, and it's always in this state of looking for something like that, you will consistently be in that first stage of depending on the yoga class, the crystal, the retreat, the mushrooms, the ayahuasca, whatever it is that you're finding that touch of spirituality or that touch of truth or that touch of your most authentic self that you know at this moment. It will always be required to be almost, I don't want to say performative, but it'll be hard for you to access it on your own. So I really want you to start kind of paying attention to when you feel like that in your everyday life. Can you find these moments that feel this deep connection? I always find it is easiest in nature. It's also easiest often around like children or people that you feel really safe with. Children, because of their innocence, they literally think like one of my favorite things is like, they tell it kind of like it is. And they also just have this like playfulness. They have this curiosity. They don't really, they can't differentiate between what's real and what's imagined. So everything is real to them. They want to play house. It kind of takes you back to these childhood moments and kind of the sweetness and innocence of life. And I feel like you find that in nature too. You feel appreciative of a sunset. You feel appreciative of like this beautiful like cropping of trees. You feel really appreciative for all of the beautiful flowers. And you have this moment where you're like, gosh, like this is just crazy. This just exists out here. And here I am living in my like perfectly like insulated home and never really immersing myself in nature. And there's so much beauty out here. You know, it's kind of that like sense of awe and wonder. So, more often than not, if you can implement moments in your day where you can touch that sense of awe and wonder, it will help ground you into being able to find that sense of truth, find that sense of you, and find that sense again of like divine or spirit outside of needing something. It's like, I don't need to go buy something or to have this next tool or to buy this next journal or somebody else is going to give me this journal prompt that's going to change my life. That's not really how it works. Now, those can be really great tools again to help that introspective moment. But when you've been doing those things for a while and you're like, at what point do we just like start living again? Then I don't have to always be like, okay, I need to go to the next, okay, I'm gonna go to the moon ceremony and then I'm gonna do yoga the next day. And then I'm gonna make sure that I meditate and journal before I go to bed that night because otherwise I might lose some of my intuitive hits that I get. And like you kind of set up this expectation for when your spirituality gets to show up. And then you place a lot of pressure on only finding those moments in those environments with that crystal, with that healer, with that thing. My goal in the podcast and all of the training and stuff like that I do is to teach you your inherent worth, to bring you back to your knowingness of your wholeness. You already have everything you need within you to create a life that you want. But when you are not grounded in your nervous system, you don't feel safe to have those things. The conditioning that you already know in your nervous system, in your brain, in your thoughts will take over and will be the presiding factor for all of your experiences. Rather than if you feel safe to try new things, if you feel safe to, again, have this sense of trusting your body to be able to find those moments on its own, to be able to, again, come back to yourself in your daily life. That is really when that kind of sense of, and I think that's what, you know, when they talk about enlightenment and they're, you know, you talk about Buddha or you talk about enlightened beings like Jesus, Buddha, people like that. And the way that they lived was enlightened. They were not only practicing enlightenment when they were meditating or praying or whatever, the way that they lived their life and showed up in the world, that's what made them an enlightened being. Okay. So, what that tells me is when you're at that point of awakening from your awakening, it's actually grounding into your everyday life. And this really changed for me when, you know, meditation's been floating around for centuries. And typically you're introduced to meditation either from like a mindfulness practice or maybe from a therapist or a yoga studio, something like that, that's really teaching some kind of mindfulness. Meditation is usually one of those first stops. And for me, I found that again in yoga, I was able to touch some of those moments and I was like blown away at how I could feel that sense of awe and wonder in life and of this moment. And you can hear my voice kind of like, so I'm like, because again, I feel it right now, this sense of like being so small in something big, but also how big of a ripple I can have on the world and how that like dichotomy plays out. It's just when you think about it like that, it's so awe-inspiring. And so what I did was I was like, okay, you know, everybody's like, oh, you should start meditating 20 minutes a day. And I was like, the reality is for me at that time, I was a single mom with two small children. I owned my own business. I worked hours and hours every day. I was trying to exercise and take care of my body and also have friends, like trying to date. Like there was a lot going on. I was like, the reality is I'm not going to sit for 20 minutes. Once a couple of years went by, yeah, kind of dabbled. I dibbled and dabbled, you know, kind of like popping in and out, just giving it a go. I'm going to try it. But I wasn't consistent until I took a lot of the pressure of needing to find that moment of, again, that oneness feeling or that, you know, kind of moment of feeling this like, I don't know how else to describe it. If you know, you know, but where you feel in awe and in wonder of life, of who you are. It feels like truth floods your body and you're so like inspired, but also like grateful for right where you're at, but like inspired to move, grateful for where you're like, it's just this like perfect dichotomy of all things. And I remember being like, okay, I need to take the pressure off that. I need to take the pressure off having to do it a certain time in order to find the sense of peace because they say that you can find it anywhere, right? They have walking meditations, they have you count mala beads to meditate, they have art, meditation. They have all these different things. So I'm like, okay, and to me, that said, it is not true that I need to meditate for long periods of time. It is to find that sense of oneness. It is also not true that I need to only be sitting down, that I can find it in all areas of life. So I was like, okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sit for 5 minutes every morning. That's it. I have 5 minutes. I can guarantee that every single day without a doubt. So I started doing that. You guys, game changer, okay? Game changer. Because all of a sudden, I wasn't looking to find that sense of, I wasn't reaching for that all the time. But what I had developed was this ritual where I gave myself the opportunity to come back to myself. It was very, very grounding and took a lot of pressure off like anything performative. And so when you're in that space of, again, awakening from the awakening, the best thing that you can do is things that ground you into who you are on a regular basis. This might look different for everybody. For me, it was every single day sitting down 5 minutes to meditate, no questions asked. For some people, it's walking every day. When they get out and walk, like they do no headphones or whatever, and they're like all of a sudden, like, like that. Oh, like I can just hear my breath and I can hear the birds and I'm not distracted by my mind or whatever it is. For some people, it's movement. They get into, whatever movement style, whether it's like, just flowing or something like that in a yoga class with no music or at home, or maybe they're sitting in like more of a yin style and they're really just paying attention to their breath and they're like, all of a sudden I feel like this peace or whatever. It's like you just become where you're like, I don't need a yoga studio. Don't need to sit with a crystal. I don't need any of these things outside of me to feel inside. When you're awakening from your awakening, find something that makes you feel really grounded. I think the second thing that is going to be the most transformative is that, and really like, you just start living. You start living the way that truth feels like for you. You stop, you're like, okay, I've worked on people pleasing, blah, blah, blah. And you just start putting these things into practice. Building community was really important to me. Building really solid friendships was really important to me. And those friendships change over time. They don't always stay like one person doesn't stay in my life forever, always, and there's seasons for certain friendships and relationships and things like that. But I started to really, if you know me in like private life, I'm exactly the same in public life. I don't change. I don't sit here and say, you know, or talk a certain way, act a certain way. Outside of this, outside of any like, um, if I'm at an event and I'm talking to you, I talk to you the same way that I talk to my friends, my girlfriends, you know what I mean? Like, same way I talk to my kids, same way, like, I just sit and I have a conversation. There's no air about me or mask that I feel like I need to put on because I'm so grounded in my truth that I don't feel the need to be anything. And that's when you kind of start to, again, transcend that moment of needing to be something or have something to feel healed or to feel more spiritual or to remember who you are. It becomes where you just are living it. You're not trying anymore. I don't try to be spiritual when I teach yoga. The most spiritual person in the room might not be me, and I don't really care. I have plenty of wisdom and what I know to be true to share. And I don't really worry about if it doesn't resonate with everybody because it's probably not going to, but it's going to hit who it needs to. And that's what I care about. And what I care about is, speaking my truth. And I'm not worried if you don't agree. And we can have full blown conversations and you can believe something completely different. And I'm not offended by it. I'm not bothered by it. I'm not angry by it. I'm like a really great person to talk politics with because you can literally, I'm like, if that's your belief and that works for you, do I think that it's right? Maybe not. But am I going to say anything? No, I'm not necessarily going to sit there and argue with you. Like, I'm going to sit there and have a conversation. Like, it doesn't need to be this big thing. It can be that we just disagree on what feels true for us. And the more that I host retreats and travel, I really realize that truth, everybody can be living very different truths and it can still be right for them. And that's really hard when you think something is fundamentally wrong and somebody opposes that view. But when you are at this stage where you're like, okay, I've worked through a lot of patterns, I've kind of done a lot of these things, you just have to go into the living part. And when you're at that point, you're like, your opinion doesn't affect me. I am unbothered by it because I'm doing all that I can to live my truth, which means anything that I feel like I need to take action on to make change for a world or for my environment to support my truth, then I'm going to do that. So a lot of people get upset, and I think this is where some of these, like, again, political conversations get heated, is that those people have beliefs and truths, and they're taking no action to make changes for the world around them to align more in that way. And that's really hard to hear. And some people, that might ruffle some people's feathers on this podcast, but I've seen it over and over. You've got a lot to say, you post on social media, but you don't actually take any action. You don't volunteer. You don't put yourself in position to be a policy changer, a policy maker. You don't actively, whether that's financially support them, whether it's, whatever it is, like you don't do any of those things, but you want to complain or you want to be up in arms about somebody else having a different belief. The reality is the world can exist in many different ways and feel true for everybody at the same time. And that is really hard. But when you get to this point, you no longer sit and judge other people for the way that they live. Okay. Are you at this point yet? Are you at this point where you're like, you see that other people are living not only differently from you, but maybe opposing from you? And instead of being like talking shit about them, gossiping about them, talking about them to your friends, oh my gosh, did you see what my sister or my friend, I can't believe they said that. I think this about their relationship, blah, blah, blah. Like you've got all this stuff to talk about with other people. You get to the point where you're like, those conversations do not interest you. They don't. And so the more that you can lean into, okay, I'm going to live my truth and lean into those things as much as possible, as often as possible, it becomes this living practice. The way that you live is awakened to your truth as you know it now. Now that might change. And I think we kind of go through these cycles, right? And it's like in this stage where you're like, okay, I just need to like integrate this and live this. I need to stop looking for the next solution, for the next healing thing, the next, whatever. And I can do these things that support that while still not relying on that. I still do spinal energetics work. I still do meditation. I still do a lot of these things, but I no longer rely on these things to make me feel in touch with who I am or in touch with my spirituality or anything like that. I use them as a way to, again, to regulate. I wouldn't even say regulate. You kind of use these tools as this ritual without expectation. It's like you're not chasing that high anymore. That's the difference. That's what I mean to say. You're not chasing feeling a certain way by doing those things. You know that they support you overall, no matter what. I don't find that moment in yoga, in meditation every day. Some days I meditate for 5 minutes, sometimes it's for 30 minutes, and sometimes I sit for 30 minutes and I never find that sweet spot. And sometimes I sit for 5 minutes and I hit it and I stay in it for all 5 minutes. But the difference is there's no pressure. Because when I step off my yoga mat or when I step away from my meditation cushion or when I get off the bed from doing a spinal energetics session, I don't go back to being an asshole. I live what's true for me in my everyday life. And I think that is the biggest thing that starts to transition you from always seeking something outside of yourself, always, on this journey of awakening, awakening more, blah, 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 like all the like weird spiritual language that people use is so that other people know that you're spiritual. That to me always weirds me out. I'm like, why are you talking like what do you know? Have you always talked like that? Like it's so weird to me. Every community kind of has these weird niche things. Like yoga has, when people start teaching yoga, sometimes they adopt like a like Indian accent, even though they're not Indian. So that is something that's kind of weird. People who kind of travel down again, finding their spirituality and stuff like that, travel down there and all of a sudden they're like, well, my highest self really feels like, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, that to me is so weird. I'm not the healer, the doctor that talks like that. And it's strange to me. It's like you let go of this need to be somebody for everybody else. And you get to the point where the way that you live is that state for you, even if it's not all the time. You recognize so much when it doesn't feel like truth in your body that you naturally steer away from those decisions, those experiences, those environments more often. So it's not that you're less triggered, it's that it takes you less time to figure out how to make change. You don't sit in the toxic environment for weeks before you leave. You're like, oh, this doesn't feel good. I'm actually not going to sign up for that. Or I'm going to sign up for that. And you're like, oh, this does not. It's not that this, again, isn't bringing something up within me. This doesn't feel right for me anymore. And you're like, okay, peace. No big deal. Your agency allows you to make these changes more easily and more quickly. So you don't stay stuck in the cycles for longer. You get out of those cycles more quickly because you're much more aware of your truth. So finding the things that you're going to do when you're awakening from your awakening and you're like, okay, I feel like I'm past needing the new crystal. I'm past needing the next divine feminine program. I am at the space where I feel very clear in who I am. I've worked through a lot of my patterns that I've seen. And now I'm at the stage where I'm like, well, should I still be doing these things? You want to develop the rituals that make you feel grounded in who you are, in whatever that is for you. Okay, so the first thing is going to be a ritual, whatever those things are for you. For me, it's meditation, it's movement, it's even things like I don't journal a ton. I'm not somebody who journals every day or anything like that, but I do notice when I need to, I'm like, this is interesting. I'm having these thoughts that are not normal for me that are making me doubt myself. I'm going to write some of these things down. It might be tapping. It might be, again, something like a spinal energetics, like once a month for a couple of months to kind of be like, okay, this is what it feels like to come home to myself. This is what it feels like to have a mind body connection. This is what it feels like to trust my intuition. This is whatever those practices are for you, get something and then visit it religiously without any expectation. And that's the key. Feeling grounded in yourself, in whatever your ritual is, to connect to yourself without the expectation that that's the only time you connect to yourself. So let it be what it is. And then you're going to take and seek out that I'm going to find these moments. Like I'm going to stop and appreciate these moments when they just show up in my everyday living. When I see a sunset, when I hear kids laughing, when I see birds or animals or things like that. And I just kind of sit in this like sense of awe and wonder for just a little longer. Those two things, the rituals that bring you home to your truth and observing everyday life where you feel that connection is going to ground you into this sensation where you'll stop constantly seeking outside of you and you'll start living your truth more authentically. And you'll notice that it feels very different versus when you first started to awaken. Things felt very hard. There might have been a lot more resistance. You'll notice the resistance and you'll make the changes quicker, which is really cool. That's kind of that stage of awakening beyond the awakening is you're like, oh, you know what truth feels like. You know what intuition feels like. You know when you're on the right path, what it feels like. And so when it doesn't feel that way, and not to say that, you're like, oh, maybe something's coming up. It's not that that doesn't happen, but it's that you don't resist it or avoid it for as long. So it becomes so much shorter. There's just less of that emotional friction. So let me know where you're at in your journey. Let me know. Like, I would love, please come over to Instagram, on TikTok, wherever, and say hi, send messages. I reply to all of them personally. So this is, I'm inviting you because I want you in my community and I want you to have a space where we can have kind of some of these conversations for what you might be feeling, but you're like, oh, I don't really know how to talk about this to my friends. And if you are somebody who is a business owner, right now I actually have this really cool quiz going on that you can actually take the quiz to find out which energy center is kind of your superpower in business. This helps you learn to trust yourself and also know where you kind of need the support. Again, like what rituals do I need to help support my growth, but also stay in my truth? This is a really, really fun quiz. It'll send you an email with all of your results and kind of just give you more information about the energetics of entrepreneurship. And I find that when people really lean into understanding their unique energetic blueprint and who they are, their truth, it's so much easier to build a business that's not only thriving, but also scalable. So you stop hitting kind of these ceilings constantly because, again, you start to get out of your own way more quickly. So that's available to you as well. I'll put that in the show notes. But if you love this episode, please leave us a review. Let me know all of your thoughts. If you agree, disagree, again, let's have a conversation. But until next time, you guys, cheers.